Thanks, Tech. Awesome. So that was Thelma Plum. Probably most of us are aware of that beautiful song and how awesome she is. This evening's purpose is we're really excited to share with you that we've just had our wrap endorsed. That's hot off the press, and we'll get to that in a minute. We're here to dream a positive future, and we're here to take action. So those are the three parts to this evening's event. So to kick us off, I'm going to do a quick introduction to Shane. Shane, did you want to give us a wave? Although I think our EWB Tech are going to spotlight you in just a moment. Shane is our EWB board member, and he will be kicking off the event with an acknowledgement.
Thanks for everyone joining today, this evening, and I guess for me, I'm currently on Cubby country here on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and I've been fortunate enough to live on this country for the past 10 years, and I'd love to pay respect and acknowledge, I guess, to the traditional owners here, and also pay respect to elders past and present. I guess Reconciliation Week, as we know, this year's theme is about more than words, and turning, I guess, that into action. And I guess this is a great forum for us as EWB and others that have joined us tonight to look at how we can actually move, I guess, from just talking about reconciliation to putting in place actions that we can really move towards reconciling with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, not only here, I guess, here in Australia, but across the globe. It's an issue, as we know, that isn't just bounded by the Australian shores, but dispossession, colonialism has been an issue across the whole world, and I guess I'm fortunate to be here tonight with everyone to have these discussions and look at how we can put our words into action. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Shane. So part one for tonight is talking about our wrap. This has been something that we've been working on this for a number of years. In our 2030 strategy that was launched last year, we spoke about doubling down on our work in Australia, and we do that primarily through our Engineering on Country program. It's a source of great pride. There's been so much learning both ways, and we're looking to really capture that and build on that in the next couple of years with our wrap commitments. So yeah, just last week our Innovate wrap was endorsed by Reconciliation Australia. And Shane, I thought maybe you would like to speak about the process. A number of us on this call were a part of the working group, and just to articulate what the importance of a wrap is.
Yeah, I guess for me, being on the board for the past 4 years, I guess I know intrinsically and cognitively, I see EWB putting, I guess, words into action through our on-country programs and what we've delivered in our partnerships with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders around Australia. But I think it's important, obviously, that we show, I guess, internally and externally our commitment towards reconciliation, and that's why we move towards developing a wrap. And I guess wrap is important that we have a collective of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders along with our non-Indigenous colleagues to sit down, collaborate and develop, I guess, the vision and our strategy towards reconciliation and putting, I guess, our strategy in place and our actions and holding ourselves to account. And, this was led, I guess, from not only the board, but members within the EWB team, as well as we had some external members as well. And it, Peter really drove, I guess, this as the project manager, and I really appreciate, want to acknowledge Peter's effort. He really brought us together to ensure that we delivered on time, and we got everyone involved. And I know there's a bit of a video after this to talk about the artwork that Ty's has done for our action plan, and I look forward, I guess, now as it's all of our responsibilities to ensure that we hold ourselves to account, and we don't just have that document as something that we flash out during reconciliation or NAIDOC. That again, coming back to the theme of reconciliation, that it's more than words, it's the actions that will make a difference. And our actions will be shown in terms of how well we deliver the items that we've outlined within our RAP. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Shane. So yeah, as Shane said, we were very fortunate to have Ty Waigana do the artwork for us. And you might remember last year's NAIDOC Week poster, really beautiful imagery of Australia, really vibrant sort of colours and imagery. And we've got a little video here to tell you about his process and to tell you why he chose the different symbology that he has for the artwork for our wrap.
The EWB work out on country with Indigenous people, bringing them engineering solutions. So I wanted to create some fluidity in the artwork, make it all connected through those key circles. They symbolise the engineering community, potential supporters of EWB, and the Indigenous community. The green is the main green used by EWB Australia. The other colours are kind of saturated earthly tones, so something you might see out in nature. And I wanted to make it reflect land itself and country. Some of the more line stuff represent high ridges, symbols for meeting places, rivers, peaks and lowlands. I created an energetic artwork to promote energy, movement, diversity and future potential and for positive change.
So that's live on our website now. You can go to it through the URL EWB/RAP, or if you'd like to look at our First Nations page, you can go /First Nations. So we're already up to part 2 of our event, and this is where we go into our visioning. But I haven't introduced our speakers yet, so can we get some spotlights happening and maybe a little wave from Arabella? Arabella Douglas is a proud Bundjalung woman. She's an environmental lawyer. She's the principal at Douglas and Associates and also principal strategist at Curry Country. Her specialty, she has so many specialties, but I've abbreviated, is helping private and public sector organisations to connect strategy, social impact and value at the leadership level.
That's what I do as a private consultant, I guess, in my own firm primarily. I do sit on a number of large boards, Crown Lands is one of them, and obviously I support my own family in our own cousin consortium, which is Curry Country, so that might kind of make more sense.
Beautiful, thanks Arabella. Marcella, have we got you here? Little spotlight on Mars. She's a writer, communications expert and campaigner. She's the current media and engagement manager at the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre. Her specialisation is cross-cultural empowerment of people with lived experiences to participate in and shape political movements and media narratives and powerfully represent and advocate for themselves and their communities. Welcome, Marcella. George is well known to probably all of us. George is on staff here at EWB. He first worked with us some time back in Cambodia, and then he came to Australia and studied a Masters of Environmental Management and Sustainability. And he has taught international development practice. He's worked for Monash Uni and the Australian Conservation Foundation, and has been conducting research in energy transitions. And George leads our influencer program at EWB. Welcome, George. And Shane, I'll just do an abridged introduction. You've met Shane a couple of times already tonight. Board member, Managing Director of Keneally Constructions and First People Recruitment Solutions. He has 15 years experience in senior executive positions, leading and building sustainable growth for businesses across the defence, telecommunications, construction resources and energy sectors. Welcome, Shane. So, in order to get us into a space where we can get the most out of the next part, which is, it's a dreaming, it's a visioning, it's taking us to a utopian future, I thought that we could breathe together. Yes, that's it. 4 seconds to breathe in, 4 seconds to hold, and 4 seconds to let go. And let's focus and center. I'm wondering if you can see 5 things around you. Just taking a moment, 5 things. I'm wondering if there are 4 things that you can touch. I encourage you to turn off your cameras and close your eyes. The next segment is 24 minutes. I'd like you to see if you can hear 3 things. I encourage you to see if you can smell 2 things. And is there 1 thing you can taste? Now, keeping your eyes closed, let's travel to the future. The date is 2041, and we are a reconciled nation. Success was achieved through a joint effort between Reconciliation Australia, pledged businesses, activated individuals, a relentless civil society, and an awakened and conscientious political leadership. Introducing the first of our panellists, Arabella, to talk about the role of the individual in achieving this success.
Okay, I'm going to unmute myself. I think that's a great idea, the whole introduction and the concept, because we often spend our time worried about where we are and not imagining a future. So for me in 2041, I would like to see less stress on trying to convince people that oxygen is for everybody, that clean air is negotiable. I would like to see an environment where Aboriginal principles of systems living, so that begins at the physics level, goes into life sciences and earth sciences, is non-debated and accepted, and that we value green living space and centering as part of our function in cooperative living. I ask that everybody, starting my video, yes, I saw that prompt. I would imagine that the individual is emboldened and excited by creating that sustainable future, not just spiritually sustainable, but humanly sustainable in large cooperative endeavours. First Nations people have been understanding this for a long time, so it would be wonderful in 2041 that First Nations people lead in a cooperative fashion in land management, cultural fire burning, management of water systems, management of ranges, and there is not a debate, but a sigh of course, that is the way. Of course, we should be moving in that direction. That's what 2041 reflects for me. I see one generation, certainly not very far away, 2041, of engineers that are frustrated out of COVID and post-COVID, who have decided to imagine their careers and their engagement with their skills and their ambition deliver differently, that is in a simpatico with that vision of cooperative living. I am tired of debating whether fresh air is necessary, fresh water is necessary, mining is necessary. They are unnecessary. We're in a crisis mode, and I think we just need to have a generation of moving into different patterns of living harmoniously. Build needs to be sensitive, it needs to be relevant, it needs to be compassionate. And I think an organisation like EWB needs to fill that space to lead a new generation of both compassion and intelligent visioning for an industry that's struggling to find both relevance and domination as we go through COVID. So that's kind of, I imagine a young engineer wanting to connect with those principles differently as they would want to understand sustainability, but vision it out to understand what is known in the academic field as kind of Indigenous standpoint theory, IST, but understand that that is actually a global phenomenon which basically equalizes human beings with both nature and other animal life. Eco before ego. So that's my answer.
Arabella, thank you so much. That was so inspiring, and you are an incredibly hard act to follow. Very powerful. Thank you. Incredible. My name is Marcella. I am a campaigner working in racial justice and human rights currently. And my answer comes from the perspective of civil society. So what role did civil society play in our 2041 future? Reconciliation is the responsibility of settlers and non-Aboriginal people, and not Aboriginal people. Our civil society realised this and persuaded the nation to live this, and acted accordingly on the 5 critical dimensions in the Reconciliation Australia plan. So this is race relations, unity, equality and equity, institutional integrity and historical acceptance. Civil society organisations joined coalitions organised by Reconciliation Australia to first decolonise practices and to shed the Western lens of business, science, art, political and social world. And then after decolonisation, first, the coalitions supported and were led by Aboriginal leaders and organisations in their campaigns and efforts for change. Issues that no longer exist, such as Close the Gap, deaths in custody, police violence, historical injustice, police violence, poverty, children being removed from families, lack of land rights, and a lack of recognition, lack of treaty. They no longer exist. Instead, we have historical justice, reparations, economic independence, children and families safe, land rights, and the Aboriginal flag is the Australian flag. Aboriginal languages and history are taught in schools. Original place names have been restored. The land is respected and cared for. We live sustainably and cooperatively and reciprocally within our means, learning from Aboriginal knowledge of how to do so. We learned. Aboriginal cultures of local nations are intertwined into daily life. Ceremony, language, food, medicine, spirituality, all led by Aboriginal people in professional roles and their knowledge. Cultural structures are there to address issues like disadvantage, violence, trauma, and to promote social justice and equality and sustainability. The movement was built by broad coalitions with common messages, common asks, and decentralised actions to call for change. The movement adapted to new political contexts, and the coalition supported Aboriginal organisations in their calls to action and helped resource the movement. Business, unions, faith groups, not-for-profits, professional organisations all joined the coalition and inspired and mobilised their members to join and took action together, and together built and sustained momentum until change happened. Engineers and engineer organisations joined the campaigns and the coalition, but also used their specialisations to collaborate with Indigenous science and knowledge groups, support Aboriginal people to take up professional positions, to invent and design solutions collaboratively on renewable energy, forest, land and water rehabilitation and conservation, sustainable housing, health and technology. Some of the tactics used were broad and decentralised, but sustained tactics for a long period of time, as well as responsive situations. Things like it began with petitions, calls and emails to key MP decision makers, rallies and blockades, lobbying, open letters to MPs, and winning bipartisan support for key legislation to address the big issues, implement and fund change. The campaign was filled with collaborative days of action with the whole movement, coordination and centralised strategy. Alliances were built between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal communities and organisations, with Aboriginal organisations having equal leadership. Alliances between political leaders, influencers and the grassroots movement. The key to creating change and the tipping point was when conservative organisations like the Minerals Council and the Business Council were persuaded of the value of change and the value of Aboriginal contribution and leadership. And conservative media like the AFR reported on the movement and exposed the government for not acting to create this change. The government was cornered and could not avoid change. Organisations and coalitions humanised Aboriginal communities and knowledge and culture and respected. They actively countered racism with powerful, consistent messages and collaboration, with compelling, persuasive stories and calls to action. We built momentum with gathering support from big influencers and big organisations, as well as small community organisations and networks joining together. And we built this future.
Excellent job.
Thanks so much, both. It's an incredibly hard act to follow. And I'm just going to start with saying what I present today, I'm open to the challenges to it, but this is what I've seen weaving in the tapestry of some of the great work done by some of the allies in the room today, in the engineering education sector, and many of the academics here. Some of the comments I'll make on the engineering education sector aren't reflective of you. But unfortunately, I think many of you represent the exception rather than the norm. And I feel really privileged to be able to work along so many great allies that are represented today and outside of this room. But here's a vision that I, George, hold for what reconciliation in the engineering education sector looks like. In 2041, we are living in a reconciled Australia with an engineering education sector that fosters engineers who understand themselves not as technical professionals, but as technology stewards, holding a critical responsibility in shaping our society into an equitable and a sustainable one. They not only understand this role, but have the skills and diversity needed to fulfill it. Central to this is an elevation and celebration of the knowledges and voices of peoples who have been engineering sustainably on this country for tens of millennia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. At the start of the 2020s, it was clear that our way of life is not sustainable. There was an increasing pressure on engineers as the creators and appliers of technologies that shape our relationship with our environment, with country, to help lead sustainable change. It was acknowledged that engineers would need a whole new set of skills and critically perspectives and mindsets to do this. it was clear that much of STEM teaching, with its focus on specialisation and right answers and privileging Eurocentric knowledges, was ill-equipped to confront the complexity and the interrelated of the sustainability issues that we faced. It became understood that we could not foster engineers who could do this without learning from our first engineers, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Without Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives and voices in engineering classrooms, we would never be able to achieve the equitable and sustainable society we must. In 2041, every graduate who enters the sector does so having learned from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and perspectives and knowledges, and placing these at the heart of their role. They don't make decisions solely within the bounds of the project or the legislation. They ask themselves the questions such as, how will this affect and contribute to community and country 7 generations from now, not just the period of this project or the next 20 years, and act accordingly. Critically, they don't make decisions without asking those who have custodianship for the country they are working on. Even more critically, they've been taught to listen to the answers when they ask those questions, even if they're hard to hear. They're engineers that not only ask how and can, but should and who, holding their responsibility to clients' intentions with their responsibilities to community and country, with the confidence to push back when they are being put in untenable ethical positions. They know that something being legal does not make it right, and to respect the first law when other laws fail. Getting there wasn't easy. It required forging bonds between universities, educators, students, and Indigenous peoples founded on respect and trust. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been and continue to be excluded from engineering processes and outcomes for so long and by so many. On the one hand, their knowledges had often been discounted as unscientific, while on the other, researchers have been extracting knowledges from communities without acknowledgement or respect for the sovereignty of that knowledge for decades. Over time, meaningful relationships grew as it became clear that educators and researchers were coming to learn and share, not assimilate and extract, but it took time. Engineering curricula had to fundamentally shift to create safe spaces for meaningful engagement with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, perspectives and reconciliation. It needed a deep reflection on the Eurocentric nature of the discipline and the assumptions embedded within it. This included a frank and hard look at how current engineering practice supporting structures of privilege positioning country as something that is ours to use rather than something we have a responsibility towards. This change wasn't possible without engineering students and educators becoming allies and accomplices in reconciliation, vocal in pushing institutions beyond tokenism to actual change, pulling reconciliation action plans off the page and into a lived reality. This was coupled with a pressure from employers making it clear to universities they couldn't employ individuals in good conscience who didn't have the interest or the ability to support reconciliation and work across cultures. Engineering educators and researchers worked hard to role model reconciliation by not just including communities as research participants, but inviting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders to shape the research agendas and curricula and sharing the benefits of both. They looked at other departments as well as engineering educators who have really led in this space to learn more about how to conduct research with rather than on or about communities. Embracing new, more inclusive methods for knowledge generation to reflect our true diversity of knowledges, drawing on the strengths of all. The student cohort became more diverse over time as the engineering profession started to redefine itself and change the stories we hear about engineering. As it reframed itself as a profession that has responsibility to communities and country, as a profession that esteems Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, and saw community engagement as enriching rather than required, more Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders came to study engineering. They did so knowing that their perspectives and their heritage would be valued. This continued a trend started by truly place-based STEM outreach, showing how engineering skills can be used to contribute to community and country, coupled with support for students to engage in these education opportunities without losing connection to community. In the classroom, there's an increase of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander engineering educators, with informal technical skills increasingly acknowledged and embraced for the solid technical and rich knowledge that they represent. In 2041, reconciliation has been a critical pillar in producing a more diverse generation of engineers who can engage communities meaningfully in their work and embrace their responsibility to country and community with confidence. In doing so, we have a society that is fairer and more sustainable in every aspect.
Thanks, George. I guess for me, looking forward, I first want to look back. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture has been around for over 60,000 years. And we are, I guess, one of the first inventors and engineers, and we've been able to pass down, I guess, that through storytelling, some of the inventions that we as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander have actually developed. And as an aeronautical engineer, I guess to me, one of the most significant is the boomerang, and the fact that it's an aerofoil, and our people were able to develop this to fly and use it as a tool for hunting food. Some other examples of looking back is the woomera that was also used to help propel the spear. We also came across thermoplastic resins through porcupine grasses, and they were able to use that to attach stone to develop spears. And we've got the oldest aquaculture traps in Victoria. So fast forwarding, I guess, to 40 years, I look upon how do we ensure that we use 60,000 years of knowledge to embed and develop our engineers into the future. And I think some of the biggest challenges that we need to overcome to move forward is being able to provide our young children in particular hope. Our children have moved beyond just surviving in their own culture. They're able to thrive and have the ability to look to the future and think about opportunities of being an engineer. They haven't been afforded these opportunities because of self-determination and dispossession of their land, and absolutely intergenerational trauma, which has affected the health and well-being of our people. And to be afforded this opportunity in years to come, we need to be able to close the gaps in those areas so that our children can see the future and take the opportunities to reflect upon our rich culture and the ability for us to being able to survive all those 60,000 years is that we were able to use our ability to invent, engineer, and adapt to the ever-changing landscape of this beautiful country that we live on. For me, it's important that we provide this great opportunity for our young people, because technology is an enabler for our people to stay on country as well. They don't necessarily need to be coming to the city to be able to be educated, to become an engineer and create a career. Technology is an enabler to keep those children on country with family and connection to their culture to enable them to thrive and think and generate new ideas, and the ability to couple their cultural rich history into westernized technology advancements. I also see that we've been able to develop educational programs that have embedded cultural practices that have been used by our elders in storytelling, and been able to pass those stories down to generation after generation. That we're not in a hierarchy situation, that we're sitting around in circles, yarning and learning from both Westernized and our rich culture of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. It's a vision that I hope that through reconciliation and the actions that we all put in today, that we're able to move forward and achieve this for our young people. Because again, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders at the moment, our mean age is around 24 years of age. And it's a great opportunity for us to ensure that we engage, as they're absolutely part of our solution in achieving, I guess, a place where we're all respected. Our land, our water, our sea is respected by all, and that we've engaged and implemented cultural practices within our curricula to ensure that we provide the safe place for our young people to learn and achieve their goals in their future. Thank you.
I invite our attendees to turn your video cameras back on, leave your microphones off. Thank you so much to our panelists for transporting us into a reachable, a tangible, yet utopian future. We're going to take the energy from what's been shared into 2 breakout rooms. If Beatrix and Luella would like to make themselves known, they will lead the next part, the final part of our event tonight, which is the take action component. So we'll be utilising Reconciliation Australia's 5 dimensions to look at different ways that different and multiple ways that we can take action individually towards a more reconciled Australia. For now, if you have to go, thank you so much for joining us. It's been just gorgeous to share space with you and to go into this dreamy place. So good night, but if you can stay, well, we'll keep chatting because it's just so damn interesting. David, I can see your hands up.
Question for Arabella. In my year as National President of Engineers Australia, we developed a reconciliation action plan for the organisation. And I went around to a lot of the divisions and had meetings with them and spoke about the plan and how important it was to get more Indigenous people into our undergraduate years. And honestly, the feedback I got worried me deeply, because it was a lot of the older engineers were saying, David, why are we doing this? It's got nothing to do with engineering. And it really hit home to the need to sort of educate our older engineers, who still have a lot of power in the organisations they run and so on, in better understanding the First Nations and the history and the cultures that we need to sort of inculcate into our undergraduate courses? And any thoughts that you've got? I mean, I put a couple of comments about making sure that we frame undergraduate curricula properly to not scare off Indigenous people. And the example I'll just quote quickly is that I was in a ACF council. I'm a councillor with ACF, and I was in a meeting with a wonderful Indigenous person, I won't name, but I was thrilled that he was coming in the same year as I was elected as a councillor. And in the first meeting, he sat next to me, and I noticed he was getting quieter and quieter. And then he got up and left, and he just turned to me and he said, "This is all whitey stuff, David. I'm leaving." And we couldn't get him back. The chair at the time was running the meetings in a very colonial, dictatorial fashion. And it really came home to me when Lydia Thorpe did a consultancy for ACF and gave a terrific presentation. And she brought in 4 elders, women elders, who were magnificent. And what struck me was the way they presented and talked randomly as if there was no structure. And that's what hit Michael when he was sitting next to me at this meeting. It was too structured and it was too organised, and it didn't sit with the way I'm sort of learning that First Nations people do their business. Am I right? And what can we do about undergraduates and the programs in universities?
Undergraduates, I mean, there's 2 parts to that. One is that just because you're Aboriginal, it doesn't mean that you have an understanding about how the cycles inform production in engineering. So there was a wonderful person, George, for example. We just had a discussion, which you've heard, and I'm suggesting to him that he reframe his own education from his own knowledge base. That is because, George, you can correct me if you're wrong, but I'm pretty sure that in his engineering degree or his history, he hadn't learnt about willow wood and actually thought in those sense about resources and the grabbing of resources and the structure of power in that time. He may have, but it's unlikely. Yeah. So in an education space, that needs to be concrete, so that as you're thinking about the discipline that you choose, you're actually learning about the operation of it in the development of the Western world and the colonies and everything sincerely. So that's more than just Aboriginal history. It actually has to do with how you understand land use, land abuse, why we went from a system of pyramid structures which understood celestial systems to one and a culture and a time that potentially murdered people like,